Welcome to MedMark's webinar series. Today's presentation is titled From Hospital to Home, Mastering Home Use Medical Device Warnings and Labels. I'm Zahal Reed, Senior Attorney in MedMark's Risk Management Department. On behalf of MedMark and today's presenter, Lindsay Nelson, thank you for joining us. Lindsay Nelson is a member of Butler Snow's Pharmaceutical, Medical Device, and Healthcare Practice Group. As a former professional tennis player, she brings a diverse background encompassing sports and law with a unique perspective on medical device safety. Her determined nature, honed through years of athletic training, allows her to navigate complex legal matters and contribute to Butler Snow's commitment to client success. Prior to her career in law, she made a name for herself as a tennis player at the University of Southern California. Throughout her collegiate journey, Lindsay was a two-time NCAA finalist, Pac-10 champion, and named Pac-10 Athlete of the Year. She continued to compete on the professional circuit, playing in prominent venues such as the US Open and the BNP Paribas Open until her career took an unexpected turn when she suffered a career-ending injury. She sought to transfer her passion for tennis to other venues and pursued a legal career, where she leveraged her work ethic to excel in her studies. Lindsay graduated summa cum laude from Mississippi College School of Law and joined Butler Snow LLP in 2022. And with that, I will turn it over to Lindsay.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and so excited to discuss this very exciting and new emerging market of home use medical devices. So again, my name is Lindsay Nelson. I'm an attorney at Butler Snow in the Pharmaceutical Group here in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm thrilled again to have this opportunity to discuss the ever-changing landscape of home use medical devices, especially since the FDA considers home devices as the fastest growing segment of the medical device industry. Home use medical devices play a crucial role in empowering individuals to manage their health independently. But these devices are and will continue to be extremely accessible, and because of that, it's necessary that they contain clear and comprehensive warning labels, warnings that the layperson can actually understand. This presentation will explore innovative solutions for home device warning labels, focusing on user comprehension to maximize safety while protecting company liability. I'll discuss compliance with regulatory guidelines, incorporating principles of human-centered design. Now, medical devices are heavily regulated. You might be thinking, I'll just look at the law and I'll meet the minimum requirements. I'm going to tell you that thinking is somewhat dangerous. Although the government and the courts tell us what kind of warnings should be placed on devices, they don't necessarily tell us how to write them for the lay user. In this presentation, I will discuss how to write these warnings for that lay user. And I will conclude with a conversation about the future of home use medical device labels. Let's get started. Let's start from the beginning. What is a home use medical device? The FDA defines a home use medical device as a device intended for users in a non-clinical or transitory environment, which is managed partly or wholly by the user. And we can see in this slide that there can be various users for home devices. We have professional caregivers, i.e. nurse practitioners, physical and occupational therapists, social workers, and professional home care aides. And then we have lay caregivers who are usually family members or friends. And then we have self-care, patients who operate that device themselves. But because patients expect to be able to stay independent, mobile, and active, the term home use extends way beyond the home per se to encompass all environments in which a person plans to use his or her medical device. This includes the home, workplace, schools, hotels, stores, etc. And there are various types of home use devices. First, we have prescription home use devices, usually more complex, but still intended to be used at home. However, they require a prescription from a healthcare professional. This prescription ensures that the device is used appropriately with guidance and supervision from healthcare professionals. These can include devices such as insulin pumps, hearing aids, contact lenses, and cold therapy machines, like after some sort of knee injury. Unlike prescription home devices, an over-the-counter device is available for purchase without a prescription. It's direct-to-consumer healthcare, and OTC devices are typically used for self-diagnosis, monitoring, or self-treatment of health conditions. They're regulated, but generally considered lower risk, and these can include devices such as glucose monitors, bandages, posture-supporting clothing, and TENS muscle therapy. And lastly, we have general wellness products. These are not considered quote-unquote home use medical devices, but I think they're important to mention because these devices are intended to promote general health, but they are not intended to treat, cure, or prevent any specific medical condition. They're typically designed to support lifestyle improvements, weight management, and these can include any kind of device like a wearable, a metabolism tracker, and even some mobile applications like calorie counters. And as you can see here, there's a wide range of home use medical devices, ranging from first aid equipment. We have assistive technology such as hearing aids, testing kits, which include ovulation kits, pregnancy tests, or genetic testing kits. We have wearables and mobile applications, and again, those are considered wellness products and not medical devices, but I still think they're important to talk about. We have pulse oximeters, glucose monitors, and they can get complex to include feeding equipment, home dialysis machines, ventilators, and nebulizers. But there are a lot of factors that are driving this market for home healthcare technology. The question is, why is healthcare going home and going home so quickly? There are many factors driving this home healthcare market, but three I think are worth discussing in detail. First, the population of the United States is aging, and people are living longer and living longer with chronic diseases that require daily medical care, and now they can do it at home. In 2021 alone, there were over 55 million people ages 65 and over in the United States. And again, people are living longer with chronic conditions, thus increasing that need for home health care. And second, we have rising healthcare costs in the United States. Because of the increased cost of healthcare services, home use devices can provide a cost-effective alternative to receiving care in a hospital. Costs have also prompted a shift towards preventative care. People don't want to risk a costly hospital visit, and instead they choose to manage their health at home. Lastly, there have been major advancements to home healthcare technology. For example, in COVID-19, that forced many patients to receive treatments at home due to restrictions. As a result, companies launched wireless and connected medical devices that enable doctors to communicate with their patients, which are still being used today. Furthermore, we have millennials, the digital native generation. They have readily integrated technology into their healthcare routines, prompting companies to innovate in order to accommodate. And we're going to see even more of that with Gen Z and Gen Y. This is so great. It's exciting because there are so many benefits to home use devices. But of course, there are also risks. But let's start with the good news first, the benefits. Some of the benefits include cost and convenience. Patients can avoid unnecessary visits to healthcare facilities, and this can be very beneficial for patients with limited mobility or those living in remote areas with limited access to healthcare. It improves personal autonomy. Home use medical devices assist individuals to be more autonomous in the assessment and the management of their health and the quality of life. It offers more comfort to care recipients than hospital-based care. Patients can remain independent, and they can remain independent for longer. And innovation. Technology is revolutionizing the healthcare industry, and it's inspiring others to make meaningful changes. There are obvious risks to those home use devices. There are risks to the patients using them, and there are risks to the companies creating them. Device labeling, for example, may include complex or difficult to comprehend warnings and precautions that can confuse lay readers or lay caregivers. Users can be struggling with physical disabilities, decreased cognitive functioning, sensory or visual impairment, which makes catering labels to the masses very, very difficult. We also see issues with device usability. Older medical devices often come with little to no labeling, IFUs, and the device quality can vary. Environmental unpredictability. Unlike the clinical setting, the home is an uncontrolled environment. Risks include space limitations, the presence of children or pets, electromagnetic performance, sanitation issues, temperature, power, and maintenance issues. And of course, there's a risk of company liability. Company liability stems from the manufacturers and the distributions of these devices, and they may face potential liability from many theories, one being inadequate warnings or the failure to warn, which I will discuss later on. So now we have an understanding of the types of home use medical devices. Remember, we have prescription, OTC, and general wellness products. We understand its growth, why they're so important. We understand the benefits, personal autonomy, and we understand the risks, the lay users' understanding of the warnings and company liability. So let's move on to the regulatory framework for these medical devices. Although there are many regulations governing these devices in general, today I only want to discuss labeling with a specific focus on the warnings. So what is medical device patient labeling? So the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act is the basis for FDA jurisdiction over labeling and advertising. And the FDA or the Code of Federal Regulations states adequate directions for use means directions under which the layman can use the device safely and for the purpose for which it's intended. And labeling, I use labeling, and I'm going to interchange it a little bit with warnings, but labeling includes indications for use, risks and benefits, setup guides, instructions for use, maintenance procedures, and of course, our focus today is warnings and precautions. And there are regulations, we have them, but the FDA has admitted that they're having a hard time keeping up with innovation. In 2010, which was the most recent guidance on home use medical devices, the FDA said, to date, the FDA has not articulated a clear regulatory pathway for devices intended for home use. We have not described the unique factors manufacturers should take into consideration when designing, testing, and labeling such devices. Fortunately, we do have some guidance on labeling in the Code of Federal Regulations. And you can see here that there are labeling requirements. There are general labeling provisions for OTC and for prescription home use medical devices, and all require some kind of adequate labeling. The only device that is not regulated by the FDA are these wellness products, or I'm calling them wellness devices, but they're considered wellness products. And interestingly, wellness devices or products are not regulated by the FDA and are not subject to the labeling requirements in Part 801 or 809. And guidance from the FDA actually suggests that a general wellness product might be considered a consumer product under U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. So those are things to keep in mind. Furthermore, there are special labeling requirements for certain products, such as denture repair kits or mechanical massagers, etc. And certain devices require specific labeling, which may include additional package labeling or informational literature. And that includes devices such as tampons, and hearing aids. We also have special regulations for in vitro product labeling. So that would be, your ovulation test, your pregnancy test, or any kind of genetic testing. However, these regulations are broad. The FDA's guidance documents can sometimes lack clarity and consistency, making it difficult for manufacturers to interpret. The guidance is somewhat outdated. The Home Use Initiative came out in 2010. This makes it difficult for manufacturers to adapt their labeling to technological advances. Again, as discussed in the beginning, they fail to contain instructions for how to develop labeling that fits a patient's needs. And there's no one-size-fits-all for labeling, as different users have different needs. And according to the FDA, their biggest challenge areas are warning statements. So what does this no one-size-fits-all statement from the FDA mean for you? It means that the federal regulations are not going to protect you in a product liability case. Of course, there are nuanced preemption considerations for more dangerous medical devices that require pre-market approval, but preemption is murky and inconsistent, and frankly, it should not be a manufacturer's only defense. We don't want to be on the defense. We want to be on the offense and stay ahead of the game. So one of the primary concerns with the use of emerging technology in home use healthcare is, of course, liability. Whether it's a physician prescribing a device or a consumer purchasing an OTC device, a manufacturer might be liable for any injury caused if the warnings were quote unquote inadequate. Or can the consumer actually understand the direction? Medical device warnings must be especially clear because consumers typically do not have a medical background and could find medical jargon confusing, or they might have issues to interpreting the information from the device. For example, if they have some cognitive functioning issues. And if patients rely on inadequate warnings, they don't understand the warnings, and then they make medical decisions, there's a possibility of injury and thus liability. So what happens if there are inadequate warnings on a medical device? Sufficiency of your device warning may be attacked on two different theories. That's negligence and strict liability. I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of those because even though these theories vary, the central issue in both is whether the warning in question was adequate. So what is an adequate warning? The court has answered that question many times, and an adequate warning will alert the consumer user to the severity of the hazard, severity being defined as the magnitude of the hazard and the likelihood of it being encountered. It will clearly state the nature of the hazard. It will clearly state the consequences of the hazard, and it will provide instructions on how to avoid that hazard. And even this guidance does not really tell us how to write the label. Although warnings, I know, they're just one small speck in the product liability universe, they matter. And why does an adequate warning matter? It mitigates the risk of harm posed by a product because it allows consumers to make informed choices about whether and how to encounter certain risks. Good warnings will help consumers perceive risk. If consumer has a realistic understanding of the potential risk, they are more likely to use the product responsibly and as intended, reducing injuries and reducing lawsuits. Warning labels allow companies to prove that the negligence was on the part of the consumer. Adequate warnings create product transparency, and that leads to patient brand loyalty. And consumer loyalty is built on trust, especially when it comes to health-related products. Adequate warnings signal that the manufacturer prioritizes consumer safety. And not only that, they are transparent about the potential risk. Consumers are more likely to trust and remain loyal to a company that takes safety seriously. Companies that prioritize consumer safety and provide clear warning labels build a positive brand image. A strong reputation for safety contributes to that consumer loyalty and can also attract new customers. Adequate labels also, or adequate warning labels, protect innovation. They can reduce the likelihood of lawsuits and product liability claims, giving manufacturers and companies the ability to focus on innovation rather than being tied up in court. So what can you do to mitigate your risk? First, let's exceed FDA requirements. Maintain strong relationships with the FDA and stay educated about regulatory schemes. Doing this will lower your risk of being accused of negligence. It may be more challenging for consumers to claim that they were unaware of the device's risks if the warnings were clear and concise. And this can also aid in positive brand loyalty or positive brand image that I just discussed. Going above and beyond the minimum requirements improves reputations with consumers, healthcare professionals, and lawmakers. Going beyond those FDA minimum requirements gives you a greater market acceptance. Healthcare professionals and institutions may be more receptive to recommending those devices or adopting them in their own healthcare settings. By setting higher standards internally, you can ensure the device labeling complies with international regulations beyond the FDA. And this can help facilitate market entry into countries with even stricter regulatory frameworks. Also, future-proofing. Exceeding FDA requirements allows you to be better prepared for future regulatory changes, reducing the need for major modifications down the line. And second, which I'm going to get into next, is write your warnings right. The rapid spread of these home use medical devices has created an urgent need for better labeling practices. And clearly the best strategy would be to eliminate the hazards through design. However, since these approaches are not likely possible, people are more likely to rely on these warning labels when making a benefit risk assessment for their own health. And I want to talk about some of the struggles that people face when using some of the more complex medical devices, such as a prescription device. So complex devices can sometimes be designed for use by trained healthcare professionals, so they're not really translating into that home use setting. Device selection often occurs by insurance companies, and insurance companies might not take into account the setting. Does somebody live far away and doesn't have access to internet? And does the device need internet? There are a lot of issues within that. And training often occurs at hospital discharge. And if you've ever been in the hospital and been discharged, you're uncomfortable, you're tired, you might still be sick. So listening to those instructions from a trained professional might not translate very well. So we've talked a lot about legal expectations for warnings and the problems with warnings, what happens with these kind of more complex devices. So what can we do better? And how can we write them in a way that is efficient and creates a safe environment for the patient, but also protects you from the manufacturer and the business and your investment? We know what the warning should contain. In the CFR, the court has said they're going to be adequate. But how do we write them in a way that mitigates liability? We can write effective warning labels using human factor research. Now, user research includes feedback, comprehension, real-world experiences. But first, you want to ask yourself, when you're labeling a device or creating a device, who is your target audience? Different users may face unique hazards based on their age, physical abilities, and health conditions. Engaging with a diverse group of users allows manufacturers to identify user-specific risks. For example, a medical device used by the elderly may require a larger font and better readability in general, while the medical device used by a healthcare professional can utilize medical jargon and more complex step-by-step instructions. So also in this user research, you can improve your user testing and feedback and observe how users interact with the device and interpret those warnings. Then you can identify those areas that might be overlooked. This can impact the design of your warning labels in general. And you can also conduct cross-cultural user research. In the United States, we have people from many different cultures and backgrounds, which can impact user perception. This research can create a deeper understanding of how different cultures perceive safety information. And I want to just mention one thing. Another thing to keep in mind in general are people's perception and risk assessment can vary, across the board. Some individuals may be more risk averse and adhere strictly to warnings, while others may underestimate risk. User research can uncover habits or common behaviors for your target user, which will likely help in that design of that warning. And another thing that we can do is we can look at task analysis. Task analysis involves breaking down a complex activity into smaller, manageable, bite-sized steps. Think about the tasks necessary for performing this process. Would warnings be helpful within the task? By identifying critical steps in device operation, you can uncover where errors are more likely to happen. Then you can craft them to address those common mistakes. And these task analysis will help you gauge the required skill level for the device operation, which will also allow you to create warnings that cater to both a nuanced and experienced user. Your warning. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty of it. Your warning should have a clear, legible text using a font and size that is easy to read. Proper and easy formatting ensures that users can quickly and accurately comprehend the content. So with that, you can think about that content and organization and format should be easy to read. Again, 12 to 13 point font, adequate spacing, white space. The reading level should be anywhere between 4th and 6th grade, and you should put this need to know information first. Avoid unnecessary words. Action words, bullet points will also help improve that readability. I also want to note that these concepts are not exclusive to just warnings. They should be applied to the entire instruction manual, which is a small sidebar. But your goal should be to provide the least competent user with the information necessary to use your device in the most safe and effective manner possible. No recommendations can ever guarantee that users will not make errors, but with warnings that are easy to read and easy to understand, the user is more comfortable with the device and is likely to make fewer errors. Good warnings promote the safe and effective use of your device by any user. We've discussed kind of how to write the warnings. We're going to use that user research. We're going to look at task analysis, which are just two factors. And we looked at content, organization, font, and that readability. I want to briefly discuss some other appropriate content of an effective warning. Effective warnings and precautions will capture the reader's attention, are understood, and are consistent enough with the reader's beliefs and attitudes to be accepted, and are persuasive enough to motivate the reader to comply. You want to invoke just enough fear, not too much so that it backfires, just a little bit. And you can use signal words like warning or caution to alert the reader that what follows is an important hazard information. A symbol or icon might emphasize the effect of that signal word. You can use hazard avoidance directives like do not, never, avoid, followed by that action to avoid or perform. The objective of this directive is to give very clear instructions to the user on how to avoid a hazard. You can also talk about the nature of the hazard. This content should include a clear statement of the risk with the warning. For example, is there an allergic reaction to the material? Are there issues with strong magnetic fields? Issues with environmental effects? Are you in a moist, wet environment, humid environment, like I am in Mississippi? Those are all issues that should be discussed and planned for in your warning labels. And of course, the consequences, specifying the serious adverse events, potential safety hazards, and limitations in the device that will result if the user does not follow those instructions. Hazard alert research has fortunately shown that this element has a significant effect on readers. If the consequences are not included, the alert is less likely to be effective. Of course, there are some other issues such as overwarning. The FDA has talked about this in their guidance. I've seen it in the courts. According to the FDA, overwarning has the effect of not warning at all. The reader will stop paying attention to excess warnings. And the inclusion of inappropriate warnings that may be speculative, you're just throwing everything in there, might deter that use of the device, which in a different scenario, if they hadn't been scared off, would have improved that patient's health or saved their lives. Thus, it's vital to have this balance within your warnings and try not to overwhelm your audience. Try not to scare them away, just scare them just a little bit. I want to conclude by looking at some common issues with warning labels that we discussed and how future innovation can be used to address them. And it's very, very exciting and interesting. So for example, we've talked a lot about sensory disabilities and the impact on label comprehension. A solution might be haptic feedback labels. So think video game controllers that buzz when something's going on. So this haptic feedback label, which can incorporate technology, would allow users to receive tactile sensations or vibrations when touching specific areas of the label. This can help draw attention to critical warnings, making them more noticeable and memorable. Second, I mentioned issues with visual impairment or even language barriers. A solution could be voice-enabled labels. Voice recognition technology can be incorporated into warning labels to provide audio warnings and instructions. Users can activate the voice feature by pressing a button or even using a voice command. And third, home environment issues. Remember, so it might be in remote areas, there might be sanitation issues, etc. Whether it's your workplace, home, school, or on an airplane. Home environments compared to a hospital environment will always carry risk. And a solution might be these microfluidic labels. So think of it as a mood ring for your label. So it incorporates technology to create warning labels that change colors or patterns when exposed to specific substances or environmental conditions. Again, it's your mood ring. Another major issue that we see and we will continue to see in home use devices is really just that range of different types of patients. And you're thinking, how can I possibly cater to every single person that might buy my product or use my device? This might be a solution, these personalized digital apps. A solution to this could be a digital app that is a companion to the device. So the companion mobile applications could work in conjunction with different types of home use medical devices. And these apps can provide personalized warnings usage instructions based on the user's specific condition, age, or any other relevant factors. You could even incorporate a health coach into those apps. That's an interesting idea as well. I believe that the future of home healthcare devices is just going to be booming, and keeping patients safe is definitely our priority, and also protecting our investment. I want to, conclude this and kind of wrap this up before we get to the questions. But home use medical device warning labels, they do and they will continue to play a crucial role in ensuring the safety of individuals who rely on these devices for their health. These labels serve as an essential means of communication, a communication between you and the patient, communication between you and the FDA. These labels can protect patients from harm and can help mitigate your risk. By exceeding these FDA standards that we talked about and engaging with the community, like with the user research, companies can establish themselves as responsible stakeholders in this healthcare industry. You can continue to foster trust among consumers and safeguard your company reputation. Those home device warning labels serve not only as a crucial tool in protecting users, but again, by minimizing legal and financial risk to your company. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to hear some of your questions, and I hope that this presentation was clear and was helpful.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. We do have a few questions for you from our listeners. Our first question, near the end of your presentation, you mentioned overwarning the user. Could you please elaborate on specific strategies or design elements to prevent this?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Warning fatigue is very, very real, and that striking the balance between overwarning and effective warnings comes down to prioritizing that essential safety information. So it comes through that task analysis strategy that I discussed earlier. So instead of overwarning with a ton of words and phrases and long paragraphs, you can use, visual aids to keep the reader engaged. You can use icons or symbols just to reinforce the message. And I would also go back to that user research I discussed. Focus on that usability testing with your target users to ensure that those warnings are easy to understand and not overly cluttered with information. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you. We had another question. How may medical device warnings apply to saliva collection testing kits at home?
Okay, so I'm assuming that this is, what kind of warning should a saliva testing kit, like, I won't name names, but some sort of genetic testing that you fit in and then you send it off and then they, give you all of your results. They definitely should include warnings about, properly sealing that sample container. And earlier when I talked about the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations 809, so there's 801 and 809. 809 is in direct response to that. So there are specific labeling requirements that are laid out in the CFR. Of course, they're very, very broad. So just some of my recommendations would include, that properly sealing, collection procedure warnings, like the step-by-step task analysis that we talked about before, and of course, safety precautions. You want to think, is this a medical device or is this a wellness product? Because we know some saliva collecting wellness products cannot, if it's a wellness product, it cannot diagnose any kind of condition or disease. So that's something to keep in mind if this is your product. And a general warning, if it's considered a wellness product, would be This is not intended to diagnose or treat any medical condition. Please talk to your doctor or your physician. So those are things to keep in mind. I would also add in information about user health conditions. So would smoking or drinking water before putting saliva into one of those little tubes, would that affect the accuracy of the test? And again, that comes back to your task analysis and user research.
All right, thank you. A third question, how would medical device manufacturers balance the level of control given to lay users and the level of constraints imposed?
Okay, so yeah, balancing that control and those constraints is definitely a delicate process. Again, you want to, I feel like I'm a broken record here, you want to consider your user needs, your device complexity, your safety concerns, and of course, regulatory compliance. And some considerations would include a user-centered design during the development of your device. So you would involve potential users throughout that development process. You can understand their capabilities and their limitations. And this could help determine the appropriate level of control in order to optimize the device's usability. I hope that answered that question. It is a delicate balance, but I still would recommend user testing within the design of the product.
All right, thank you. And we have one last question. What are some strategies for mitigating the risk of patients misinterpreting their own data as an output of home use device?
Such a great question. I know if, again, a wearable is not considered a medical device, but I always perk up and get worried when I see anomalies on my wearable devices while I'm trying to monitor my own health. So, some strategies to address the risk of, of wearables, but more likely a home use device or an OTC medical device classified as such would be to include very clear and simple presentation of that data so people aren't overwhelmed in trying to self-interpret. You can provide context and explanations with that data. Color codes or alerts would also be helpful. For example, if it's considered a prescription home use device and it's an insulin pump. Instead of kind of throwing all this data at them on their device, you can use color codes, which then would kind of alert them in a way that would send them to their healthcare professional to discuss those changes instead of them trying to interpret all the data. You can also include reference ranges. I've seen a lot of devices do that. So you include you get your baseline. Medical devices are now kind of learning with the person, which I think is so interesting and fascinating. So they take some time to get to know you, and then they're able to kind of lay out what your normal baseline would be. And having that normal baseline then allows you to kind of see if there is a pattern, again, or an anomaly that requires some immediate attention. And kind of with that too, you can show your trends of your own historical data. One of my devices shows my, again, not considered a device, it's a wellness product, but it will show me the historical range of like my sleep, for example. How much REM sleep did I get? How long did it take me to fall asleep? And I can look at those patterns over the past couple of months. And if I see something that's kind of concerning, I might give my doctor a call. And, of course, with something that's considered a medical device by the FDA, you're going to want to make sure that this information is nice and clear. You can also add additional educational materials to explain the significance of that data. You can't get a hold of your healthcare professional, so You have the manufacturer provides you with additional literature that you can go through and kind of figure out how to interpret that and educate that. And of course, those directions should be nice, easy, and concise, easy to read, and a step by step. I always like to say, explain this to me like I am a 5-year-old. So it's kind of that same concept. Should explain it just 1, 2, 3, and 4. And of course, probably the safest bet would be to encourage consumers to discuss their data with a healthcare professional. And then I think I did mention, these like health coach integration techniques. So remote monitoring or a professional can support a user in understanding and managing their health data. And this all prevents that misinterpretation of data, which may lead to poor medical decisions, which would then, of course, maybe, hopefully not, but lead to a pretty bad adverse event leading to later on litigation. So I hope that those strategies were helpful.
Yes, thank you. And Lindsay, thank you very much for your time today. The design and implementation of warnings and labels for home use medical devices can be incredibly complex, and we really appreciate your ability to break down this complicated topic for us.
Thank you. It was an honor to be here.